Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome tonight on a Friday night. I'm really excited to be here with you all for this really special panel discussion of the Advocates, a very long-awaited one. Thank you for persevering with us with this shuffle due to COVID. We're here and we're all really excited to be here. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we're currently on in Meanjin, which is the Yagara and Turrbal people, and as well as the traditional owners of the land in which you're all joining us from on Zoom tonight, because we are live streaming across the country. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Just some housekeeping for everyone here. If you need the bathrooms, they're just through this gate in the corner there. And as we are outside, I think everyone has their mask off, but you're welcome to have your mask off. At 7:15, we will have time for a Q&A, so please save your questions until then. And for people on Zoom, if you do have a question, please just type them into the chat box, and then our Zoom host will pass them on to me, and I will pass them on to Ange. And if you don't know how to use the chat box, the Zoom host is about to send a link through where you can buy the Advocates online, and that should pop up with a little notification as to where the chat box is. For everyone in store, you can purchase a copy of the Advocates inside at the counter, or two, once we're finished, and also stick around, grab a drink and say hi to the panellists. Chairing our talented panel tonight is Dr. Angela Dean. Angela is an environmental social scientist based at QUT. Oh, she's just moved to UQ, everyone. Research explores how to promote engagement with conservation issues across diverse communities. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming tonight. Before we kick off with the questions, we're going to do this rolling tiered thing of interviewing the panel. So first of all, I would like to introduce Robyn Gulliver, who is one of the authors of this fabulous book. Robyn is, apart from an author, she is also an activist and a social researcher that studies activism as well. So thank you for writing a fabulous book, Robyn, and would you like to interview the rest of it?
Good evening, everybody. On my left, right here, I have Jan Nicol, and Jan is chapter 1, and she is a long-term activist, primarily focused at the moment on climate, but has a background and currently is a retired civil servant. To one along on the left there is Heather Barnes. Heather Barnes is the co-founder of the Limber Creek Catchment Coordinating Committee and has also a long-standing history of Queensland, not only environmental advocacy in Queensland, but also a lot of social community work that she's been involved in.
Before we start, I'm going to start and say this is a fabulous book, Robyn, so thank you for writing it. It's really inspiring and it makes you go, oh shit, I've got to get off the lounge and do more with my life. So thank you for that. And if anyone else feels the same way, I'm sure there's plenty of inspirational women who have experienced and motivate us with. I'm going to read out the names of the women in the book because basically this is a story of women who engage in change for the environment. The experiences are diverse. We're going to hear from some of them tonight. We have Jan McNicol. We have Jane Brenner, June Norman, who is also in the audience. Do you want to wave, June? If any else of you are in the book and I don't know you here, just wave as well. There's Cara Shields from Sydney, Jill Redwood from Victoria, Michaela Jade from Sydney, Robin Murphy, another Robin from Perth, and Elle Gibbs from the Blue Mountains, and Heather Barnes from Brisbane. So these women all have amazing stories, and in some ways, they're just the tip of the iceberg of the amazing women that are around in this country seeking environmental change. So Robyn, to kick us off, can you tell us what motivated you to write this book and why hearing the stories of activists and women in particular is so important to tell?
The stories kind of started when I was doing my PhD actually, and one of the projects involved interviewing environmental activists, so long-term environmental activists, and primarily volunteers. So I was doing these interviews, they were on Zoom, and a couple of the women I interviewed just had remarkable stories. And as an activist myself, I thought I should know these stories, right? It should be obvious to me. So the two examples were Jan Bremer in Perth, and she was really engaging on Zoom too, and she was telling me about how the site across the road from her house, the first house they'd bought, kind of blew up. It was a toxic waste dump in Perth, and then she spent the rest of her life since then trying to fight for environmental justice. This is something I knew nothing about, and I've lived in WA for 5 years. And then another person I interviewed, Jill Redwood, was telling me about how her work trying to look after this forest had prompted a lot of backlash in her community in Victoria, and she'd had her horse shot, she'd had her letterbox smashed with baseball bats, she'd had glass thrown on her driveway, things like that. And I know that the environmental movement in Australia is primarily non-violent, but that kind of crossed the line. It was really interesting to me. So I said to both these women when I was interviewing them, gee, someone should write your story, right? Someone. And I think actually with Jill, I said, oh, I really want to write your story. And at that point, it was just too late. So that was how the book started. But it also came out of a long time that I've had been an activist, observing how many women are advocates or activists, but how hard it is sometimes for women to put forth their achievements as advocates and to say what they've actually done, particularly when it comes to keeping groups running, forming new environmental groups and just creating communities of care. So that was kind of the other reason why I wanted to do the book.
There is a diversity of experiences in the book from so many perspectives, but one of the things that is unique is that at some point these women were tootling along, living life, and something happened that acted as a catalyst for action. I want to start with Jan. Can you tell us, sorry Jan,
what was my catalyst?
Tell us a little bit about what put the fire underneath you to make you go, damn it, I'm doing something.
Well, probably the latest thing was watching Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth when that came out 10 years ago now, wasn't it? 2011? 2006? Oh, okay. Historic. Yeah, 2006. I went to see that, and Al was actually in town, I think. And I was just shaken by the end of that. I thought, I knew climate change was happening and it was a major environmental issue. Yeah, a lot of other things happening. And that made me think, this is it. And I was shaking by the end of that movie. It was so upsetting, just the realities of the situation we were in back then, 15 years ago. And I can't say that anything has got significantly better. There's a bigger climate movement now, which is the good news. But yeah, that was what made me really sit up and take notice and think, I've got to focus on climate, and that's going to go somewhere. And I guess the second thing that happened was back in 2017 when I realised my job at QUT was being outsourced to North America, and I was running out of time, and the climate was running out of time, and the climate movement was running out of time, and I said, I'm out of here. So I left.
Heather, can you tell us a little bit about your catalyst fire underneath you?
Well, I've been the Whites Hill Bush Care Group for quite some time in the Whites Hill Pine Mountain Group, and we'd been asking council had closed the rubbish dump at Whites Hill and covered the dump and made sporting fields, which was a great idea. But we asked the council whether they're going to have a management plan of what they were going to do with the various areas of the reserve, including the bushland that we've been working in. They kept fobbing us off for a long time. And eventually one time they came to us and said, yes, we will do a management plan. What do you want in it? We go, who are we? We don't know anything. So we gathered all these different environmental people that we could find, and primarily trying to protect the bushland from sporting groups that wanted to make new tracks through the reserve, which we were really upset about. And for 6 months we had meetings backwards and forwards with various people, and we formed the Bulimba Creek Catchment Group at the end because we realised Whites Hill Reserve couldn't be an island. We needed those connections in the corridors, and that was back in about 1996. And myself and several of the original ones are still around and still active in it. And we just thought that if somebody doesn't do something now, like what's going to happen? This was way before children, way before I was married, but over time, I've been involved in the group for so long, and it's a legacy. And we just thought if we don't do something now, it'll be gone and you can never get it back.
Robyn, one of the quotes you have in the book is, and I'm just at an age, reading their stories, we can reflect on the rewards and sacrifices that advocacy brings and choose the type of advocate we can be in return. And yet so many of the stories are almost not about choice. It's if a topic chooses the woman to become the advocate, like Jill with the toxic waste dump in the yard. To what degree are women just driven by an opportunity that grabs them rather than looking at a menu of this and that?
Well, firstly, I'm impressed that I wrote that because I can't remember that quote myself. I don't know. Maybe I think this is more a human thing, right? When something captures your heart, like with Jan with the seeing Al Gore documentary, and then climate became so central, and Heather with the bushland. And I kind of feel, I guess, close to Heather as well, because when I walk in the reserve, you just feel different. You feel being in nature, and that's a driving force for action. So I think maybe it's more that there's something in people that makes them transfer from experiencing this thing, like, oh, I'm shocked, I'm angry, I'm worried, or I enjoy being in nature, and transferring from that feeling to then the knowledge that they should take action. So that's a really big jump, right? Like, I care about something, I should do something about it. And I'm not quite sure why people make that jump and some people don't, but when it's made, it's like you can't go back. Yeah, once you feel like you have to do something, you have to do something, right?
A lot of the stories in the book discuss how the environmental movement in Australia has changed a lot over, say, the last 3 or 4 decades. In particular, so that might include the types of activities that activists do. So there's a lot more now emphasis on meticulous planning of events, and things like divestment movements take a lot of planning and time. And also that the vision of who is participating and how is also different. So you mentioned that there was very much a gentleman's club vibe. That's in Jan's chapter, to some of the environmental groups. And even at the very start of ACF, they were planning to make it a men's only group until they remembered Judith Wright and her amazing advocacy for the Great Barrier Reef, and poetry, of course, as well. So can you share your experience of how the movement's changed? This is whoever wants to start, but I'm going to ask all of you your opinion, so there's no getting out of it. Is how it's changed and how women have contributed to that change or benefited from that change.
Maybe I can just start with a short story, which is someone that I know in Wynnum who happened to be, we were talking about something in a conversation at some point. She happened to mention that she was a Takan tiger, and I was just blown away. I was like, you were a Takan, sorry if I say it wrong, tiger, and that was just an off-the-hand comment. And she felt like what she'd done was nothing, but she'd actually done all the newsletters. Hey? Can you tell us more about the tigers? Oh, when they were doing the protests in Tasmania against for the Franklin blockade, like a really critical part of Australia's environmental history. But anyway, she kind of just thought it was nothing. And I felt that reflected how we view women in the environmental movement over time, because she felt that she was just doing admin. And a lot of that, what women did back then was kind of admin and maybe not valued. Whereas now when I think of the environmental movement and I think of the activism I do, 99% of it is admin. And if you didn't do it, you don't have a movement. So maybe it's about the way we view the works that we do in the movement as well. But I think Jan has basically all of her life, she's lived through the changing environmental movement. So what would you say, Jan?
So I'm a little bit flummoxed by the question because I'm trying to think of a way that it's changed. But one thing I could say that I think over the years that I have been active in social movements, I have seen a very gratifying increase in the status of women in society generally. And women in general have felt more confident to come forth and take leadership roles and be respected for doing that, rather than have to be regarded as being uppity and needing to be slapped down. So I think that's the progression that I've seen, that there's more women who are prepared to take leadership roles. We're just as brave as men, I'll have you know, and we'll take on anything. So it's just become more opportune to do so, and I hope to see that continue.
Heather, your activism is focused more on promoting stewardship and bush care, so hands-on, on-ground activities. Has the contribution and the culture in which women participate in those sorts of activities changed a lot, or has that been more steady?
I think from my point of view, I think it's been fairly steady, but I think from what the groups that I've been in, it's been that the women that have been the organisers, so that the men, not always, but on the whole, they have these wonderful ideas, which is great, but they don't always have the follow through or know what to do with their wonderful ideas. So I think that's been the few groups that I've been in is a backup. And reading all the other stories in the book, I don't really still know why Robyn decided that I was an advocate, because I think what I've done is absolutely nothing compared with what some of those.
Oh, that is what I heard from almost every woman in the book.
This is Exhibit A on the underselling one's contribution.
I'm sorry. So within the groups that I'm in, I think there are more women now than what there were when we started 20 odd years ago. I think that is true.
One of the particular things that I think it comes up in the story about June, about how many women, and I think this has been a flavour of that, struggle with believing and being convicted in their own voice. You can't have doubt every second of the day and still get up, and at some point you have to believe in yourself and act, and yet so many women struggle with this. Is this a universal thing? Is this the imposter syndrome of activism that women just universally experience and need to fight? Or do some women just have the innate terrier and can go?
Well, I can only sort of extrapolate from my own relatively short background in activism, seeing this, but I do remember being in some groups, I think with Jan, and we'd sit there at our meetings, and I remember just being fascinated by new people coming into the meeting and sitting down, and their responses if they were a woman. And so for a long time, women in general, we're very much generalising here, would be quiet. They wouldn't feel like they had a place. They would wait a long time before they put their hand up to do something. If they did something, in general, there was a very strong concern they might do it wrong. Now, I think it really has changed. I think a lot of women, especially younger women, for example, through the school strike, are feeling a lot more empowered, and also probably that correlates with feeling a lot more angry about how things are, and also just that general change in how we view women's work and what it actually means to the movement has been a positive thing. Even so, when I'm in groups now, I still see more women than men just sitting there quietly.
Jan and Heather, is cultivating that belief in your own voice something you have to do on a regular basis?
Yeah, look, I have my bad days where I just don't want to do anything and it all seems too much and the voices start getting to me. And then I do some things that I know build me up and I get out there and have another go at it. But I'd also like to give a shout out to there are some women in this audience who've done far more than I have. And again, I do what I can with what I have. But I'm not wanting anybody to run away with the idea that I think I'm the greatest, because I don't. I have some ancestors and comrades in this struggle who are absolutely fantastic.
I think that's a very good point. Maybe something that we find hard is praising what we've done and then not on the flip side saying that that's actually insulting other people, because that's not how it works. And the thing about the movement sometimes is that it's easy to fixate on one person, but everybody who's active knows this takes many thousands of people to get anything done, right? So I think we can still celebrate the achievements of the woman in the book, which is why I wrote the book, while still respecting the fact that there's another kind of million other women out there we could write a book about too.
Did you want to comment about cultivating self-belief? Or have you always had it?
No, I haven't always had self-belief. I think back when we started, I was really quite honey. Didn't say all that much to many people at all. And just over time, sort of, I was in another group that sort of developed that self-confidence, I think. And not by default, but just over time, I just became in leadership roles of those two different groups. And the whole thing, I think, is it's all been a collective. And I think all the other people in the various books, like the various stories, is the same. It's never just been one person. It's always been a team effort. And some people at certain times have got more energy and more drive and more time, waxes and wanes of what different people's, lifestyle, whatever happens. So it just depends on being in the right place at the right time is how I see the two groups that I'm in, why they've been successful. It just happened, the stars aligned, that the people were available at the time, and, had things happened 2 years earlier or 5 years later and nothing would have happened. It would have just fallen apart, not fallen apart, but outdone its need and just moved on.
Can I also just add that I personally, if I'm in a group or if I'm doing an activity or organising some sort of event, I like having the people in the group who listen, who respect and ask, quietly, or they don't say much, and then you go to them and they work together. those are the sort of people that we need in the movement, because sometimes when you have the more confident people can make things a little bit more difficult to get stuff done. So I think we actually, when you have a group of people and they're all respectful and quietly listening and working together, that is the joy of advocacy.
I suspect one of the challenges is how we create stories to share, whether that's through the media or through personal narrative, but we love the single person being amazing. We love seeing the Grace Tame and the Rosie Batty, and they're truly amazing women. And similar, there's a lot of researchers and scientists here in the audience. It's similar with science. We want to think of some dude in a lab, not the 10 or 20 people slaving away, helping to create that result. So we don't often celebrate narratives of group activity as well as of individual achievement. Do you think that's part of it?
I think so, but I do remember as well when I was trying to, maybe I was doing a project and it was about volunteer groups and who runs volunteer groups, and there was a real issue with the framing about who's in charge of a group. So the word leader doesn't have a nice connotation really, and yet we have in any group you might have say 10 leaders. They're all organising, they're leading in a different way, and I think part of it is that we do need a leader, but we don't have the language to talk about all the other people that are doing really important tasks that might not ever view themselves as a leader, which is pretty much every woman in my book, whereas I would say they are kind of leaders as well. But part of the book is trying to change that narrative and say you can have women like June there and so many other people I see in the audience actually who've been doing this for decades, and they're never going to stand up there and be the people in the media maybe for some of those people, but they're actually like, what do you call it, the backbone. You don't have a movement without them.
How hard is it to celebrate the success of these women if they're always going, no, it's not me, it's someone else? Do we just need to ram a bit of positive cuddles their way, or do we need to do something else?
I don't know if everybody wants their success celebrated. Maybe, I'm not sure. What would you guys say
About being celebrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to be sort of
mass
promoted?
cuddled at the end?
Sorry, no, it's a little bit of appreciation of people showing up at the watch house when I get bailed out. It's nice, but I don't want too much attention because it could turn into negative attention from the other side. So yeah, quiet appreciation from my comrades who know what I've done and why is certainly appreciated. But yeah, I don't.
It's not always a nice thing as well when you get a lot of attention, right, as an environmental activist. So for a very good reason, lots of people don't want to be the ones in the media or the ones doing the hotspots and stuff. There's very good reasons for that.
I think we've had that, not always with women, but in many things, people who are outspoken or whatever, sometimes it becomes a bit like a tall poppy syndrome. People say, right, this person's doing this, and then other people say negative things. And so I think if you sort of stay under the radar a little bit, you can get on with doing what you're doing without anybody sort of half the time even knowing what you're doing. But the organisation keeps on rolling along. Having small, what we've done compared with these other ladies, it's been very small wins, but very important for our patch of the world. And I think for me personally, I'm quite happy to go under the radar.
Sneaky Heather is going to do stuff that you won't know about until it's too late.
Can I just say, Angela, there are people who have what would you say, like a media profile, who are suffering immensely for that, and they take all that suffering on behalf of all the other activists. So we celebrate all the activists and the advocates who are doing all the hard work, but then there's some people that have targets on their back, and we can do our stuff by staying back behind the scenes.
I want to ask a few questions about the emotions of being an activist and maintaining your activism. Again, a lot of stories in the book and some of the conversations we've had tonight are about the rage and anger. And I guess, like believing in your voice, women aren't always socialised to feel anger and express it and act on it. Zooming out to women more broadly, a lot of women reach a certain age where they might need glasses, and they may feel a little bit more angry some of the time, more comfortable speaking out and not being pleasers. Is menopause an amazing opportunity to turn women into activists? Because there's maybe a few of us about to become activists in the next couple of years.
Would either of you ladies like to answer that first?
I think as one ages, one grows out of motherhood. I never did it, but I know it happens with other women, and that gives a lot more free time to do the stuff that needs to be done. You don't have jobs and families to constrain your time. I think that gives you a lot more opportunity to think about what should I be doing, what could I be doing, what do I want to be doing. So I don't know if it's the actual biological process of menopause that's motivating, but I think it's just great. You know, husbands get old and die and move on, and it gets boring, and kids leave home, and you're sitting there thinking, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? But you know, I didn't ever do any of that stuff, but I can understand that others do.
For me, my family over there would say I'm probably the least angry person around the place. I very rarely get angry. I seem to have a philosophy of if you can't do anything about it, don't waste your time and effort on getting angry and blowing your stake. Like, find something useful that you can do. My situation is my husband was super supportive, and my two kids, this is one of them who's now a mother herself, the meetings and stuff that I went to, they just accepted that it was the second Wednesday, Mum's going off to a meeting. It's a Saturday morning, she's going to bush care and the kids had come with me or whatever. So I think in my situation, it was the supportiveness of the family that enabled me to do it. When the two groups, I mean, when we started, my kids were quite young, and we were very lucky to be in a financial situation where we decided I wasn't going to go back to work full time. It was more important to stay home with the kids. So therefore I had more time on my hands than somebody who's working full time. So early on in the piece, you know, the kids would be at kindy, so I'd have, you know, half a day or whatever where I could go and do something. And by the time they went to school, it became, you know, 3 half days because I was helping at the tuck shop or the reading groups or whatever. So as the kids got older, I had more free time during the day that enabled that to happen. So had I been going back to work and working full time, then none of the groups that I was in would have happened, but not to the degree that it happened because of that financial situation where, you know, we decided that the kids were more important than money. And I think a lot of the people for the books that I've read, you need the fire, you need the passion for whatever it is, but you also need to have the ability to control your life around what you want to do and what you need to do.
Moving from rage to despair, there's a lot more discussion in the media, in academic research, in other areas about eco-anxiety and similar concepts about the despair people feel about the imminent climate crisis. We're post-imminent now, aren't we? The climate crisis. And how do activists manage that despair? One of the quotes from Jill in Gippsland is that sometimes you just feel like you're pissing in the wind. And in the face of some large-scale changes going on and big organisations, big things to change, how do we maintain moving on despite despair?
Well, it was Jan actually who said one line that always stuck with me, which was taking action is very palliative, I think.
Yeah,
yes.
therapeutic.
Yeah, therapeutic, yes. By doing something, you can feel a lot better. But beyond that, yeah, there is kind of existential despair, rage, lack of hope. I don't know, you could have a whole range of negative stuff. You just, I'm not sure. I think for most people that I know who are sort of longer term advocates, just you mentioned it earlier, and you just don't feel like you have a choice though. Yeah. So you can have all these horrible feelings, but you can't really walk away, can you?
No, I don't think so. I think I do the action that I do because it alleviates my despair. I think when the bushfires were on in like 2019 and 2020, I was extremely despairing because there wasn't anything happening that I wanted. I said, where is everybody? Come on, you know, our country's burning. What are we doing? And everybody had gone on Christmas holidays. And I that was really difficult for me. And but once people started coming back, you know, we started doing things and I felt okay about it. If we're talking about personal emotions, you talk about rage. I don't feel, oh, wait a minute. Do I feel angry? Sometimes. The time I got stuck into elbow at Woodford, I think I was pretty hungry.
I do feel a little bit like Heather though. I have felt in particular one moment of total rage that I really was not able to recover from for quite a long time, and the only thing that really kept me going was bush care. So that's another message of the book. There's different sorts of advocacy. You don't have to be out there. In this particular example, I was just screaming at someone about something and just lost my nut. But you know, a tree doesn't talk back, do they? A tree doesn't refuse to commit to a net zero by emission policy by 2050. You just plant it and it grows. And so that is also a different, same sort of therapy, but in a different way. And also the people in bush care. And the bush care groups, the Habitat Brisbane groups and the catchment groups are just, I don't know, they're just really, they're really lovely people who, yeah, like Heather said, I just don't associate them with being angry. But when I'm around other activists, of course, I'm really angry, they're really passionate, they want to do something. It's just a different form of advocacy.
Yeah, so you're right. The groups, the two groups that I'm in, it's especially the bush care and the bushwalking, it's just so peaceful. And I've thought all along we've got, you know, we've got lots of volunteers that come and help us in the nursery, in the bush care or whatever. And I don't know what it is, but the kind of people who come always seem to be caring about people as well as caring about the environment. So maybe people who have got a different outlook on life have just not found those groups because they probably work out that, you know, we're not going to be taking on any of those sort of major issues. So we do take on major issues. The reason why one of the groups started was we're trying to stop mountain bikes trashing the bush, and 30 years on, here we are, we're going around the roller coaster doing it all over again. But I just think personally, I can't change everything. I can't change the world. So all I can do is look and say, well, if I do something in this particular one patch of bushland, there's millions of hectares of bushland, but if I just concentrate on a small bit there, and I can make a difference. And, you know, the bush care sites, we've been going back there for 30 years, and it's just amazing. You go back and say, I remember when this side of this hill was just covered in guinea grass and ochre and glycine or whatever. You go back now and it's all just native grasses and trees, and, you know, koalas up the gum trees and wallabies going through. And I think we've done something. You know, if we hadn't stuck together, and, you know, sometimes there are only, you know, 3 people in bush care for a while, and now we're back up to sort of 20. It comes and goes, but I just think I always find, you know, going out into the bush just very calm, and my husband will back me up on this. I much prefer to go to bush care for 2 hours than mow the grass or chop the weeds in my own garden. So I think Chris, he likes it himself. Well, I don't know whether he likes it, but he does it without complaining. So I just think, for me, myself, just find something that you enjoy and find like-minded people, and the whole thing to me is, it's work, but it's not over daunting work. And I think you've got to find the enjoyment, and if you don't enjoy something, I think you're going to, in the end, just say, well, I'll just go and find something else. So it comes down to the people as well as the idea that you're working towards. You need those two things to make you feel good. Otherwise, you'll just, you know, go away and find something else.
I want to draw on what you said, Heather, about the finding the right people, because that's a really universal thing that comes out as well. As part of that issue grabbing you is the people in the movement, connecting with them in some way. And there's stories about people sort of dipping in and out of different bits of the movement and trying to find their people, find the people they connect with. And yet for some it takes time. Some of the stories you described, they do that on and off for ages before going, right, this is now me. What advice do you have for people who are still in that sort of dipping in and out, trying this, oh, not quite me, trying that? What do we do with those people to set a fire under them?
Well, I think probably maybe the first thing is to read June's story, because I was really struck by June's story. So she came to advocacy late in life, and, you know, when she was able to, her children were grown up. And then it took her a while to find as well the group that suited for her and location-wise and with people. And then now I visited June, and I wrote about the last part of our visit in the book. We'd gone up for the Bunya Festival, and just me and my friend Tanya were hanging out with June for the weekend. And she was involved, like, I think I counted at least 5 groups. She'd started maybe 3 of them, or been a co-founder up in Kuran. She had been a climate guardian angel. She'd been to the Paris climate talks previous years. She'd been involved in gas activism. She'd been arrested like lots of times, and yet here she was doing a food co-op in her local community and a leader, June is a leader, right? And her whole journey is in that book. So I think I'd say read June's story, because you're never going to find the right group first up. I would also highlight that one of the challenges of writing the book was that all the women got to read the chapters afterwards and read their transcripts. And it was very difficult because nobody wants to criticise. So anything about the challenges of being in groups, and anybody who has been in a group for a long time or even a short time knows you have significant challenges sometimes getting along with other people, especially when you're all passionate volunteers. But a lot of that got cut out. Fair enough.
So wine afterwards.
Yeah. So it's more, I hope the message comes through that yes, you go to a group, you see if it's right. If it's not right for you, go to another one. You don't give up. And I do think lots of women, as I mentioned earlier, when I'm in those meetings and women come in and they don't say anything and you don't hear from them, I have a feeling a lot of them just don't come back to any group. And that's a massive loss, isn't it?
Sorry, what was the question?
It was what are your recommendations or handy tips for people who are in that floating, contemplative stage of trying to find their way?
Just keep looking. Don't give up on the first meeting, maybe the second or third if it really isn't for you. But yeah, keep looking. There's lots of groups around. Luckily for us, we have lots of opportunities living in a big city. And yeah, I've been in so many groups and kicked out of so many groups. So yeah, I just keep moving on, and then I find a certain compatibility and stay there for as long as it's good.
The two groups that I've been in have been quite stable, and the core of both groups has been there since the year dot, 20, 30 years. And people come and go. Some people come for, with bush care, some people might come once, you never see them. Some people might come a couple of times, you don't see them for 6 months, and then they'll come again. And I think you just have to, if you find a place that you're comfortable with, keep with it. And like you said, if a particular group, irks you for whatever reason, nobody's forcing you to go to the group. If you don't like the politics of what's happening, or the backstabbing or whatever else might be happening, nobody's forcing you to stay with the group. So if you're not comfortable with the situation, I think it's time, as Jan said, to go and find another group and try and find somebody that's got same sort of ideas and passion.
One of the things that's lovely about the book, there's so many lovely things, you have to buy 10 copies, is I guess the diversity of stories and experiences. So often I think the movement valorises a certain model of activism, of this brave hanging off the front of a boat type of thing, which needs a bit of physical coordination. And yet so much in the book, there are people inspired by very local issues, their backyard exploding. There are people who are inspired by global climate movements. There are people who slipped from local to global. There's very much radical activists, there's stewardship, let's fix this ground here, and there's even a few chapters on really building engagement among the broader community. How important is it to tell us those stories?
Oh, well, I wrote the book, I guess I would be biased and say I think it's important. I often, when I talk to people and they ask what I do, like as a volunteer, I often test out different words. Sometimes I say I'm an activist, and you can tell straight away, you get a response whether they like it or not, right? It's quite a stereotype against it. Or else I might say I'm a volunteer. That's okay. Might say you're an environmentalist. That's really okay these days. And part of this whole thing that came to me when I was writing the book is, why do we react so strongly sometimes against activists? And I might be projecting here because I'm probably just thinking my dad, but yeah, who does not really, would prefer not to have activists around. But it's more that that response was really, really interesting to me. So a very important part of the book was showing all the different types of advocacy you could do. And the one I want to draw attention to there was Caro. So Caro and her friend set up the Ben Unfucker, apologies for the language, the Ben Unfucker website, yeah. And I don't know if it would fit many people's definitions of what advocacy is, and certainly not activism, but their whole principle was, we want to reach people who don't care about the environment, don't know about the environment, and take them on the first step of their journey. So I really felt like that was an important chapter to include, to show that whole range.
We're getting close to the time where you get to ask the questions, but I just wanted to ask a couple to wrap up. I want you to tell me about the joy of being an activist or an advocate. Often we hear about the difficult stories, the despair, the suffering, the possibly occasionally painful meetings. Can you tell us also about the joy?
Well, isn't it cool when you're around a bunch of people who care about the same thing as you, all doing something about it?
Yeah, and doing a successful action, you know, well, a fun action, and coming through the other side, and that feeling of achievement that comes from partaking in a brave action, and having, you know, acquitted oneself reasonably well in the context. Yeah, that's a real joy in that. Maybe it's magical thinking that this is going to make a difference long term, but you know, it's kind of a, you know, I was in there, I did what I could.
I think with me, the number of events that we've organised over the years with the groups, with school kids, with different organisations, just with the general community, apart from COVID years, if you knock them out, on average we were, you know, running about 50 events, and that didn't count the normal day-to-day stuff. That was, you know, school trips, tree plantings, litter collections, talks here, talks there, whatever. So the number of people that you end up talking to, the whole team end up talking to or working with, and you never really know if you've made a difference to anybody at all. And I met somebody a while back, and their child had been at a tree planting when they were about 5 or something, and I'd met them, you know, 15 years later, and they said that the kid still remembers when they drive past, you know, whatever reserve it was, that the kid who's now a teenager says, I remember when we planted those trees. And so you don't know what difference you make to those kids. And we often said, you know, with talking to school kids and stuff, even if the children never come and plant another tree, that's fine, as long as they don't go out and chop them with an axe. You know, we've made a difference, you know. So I think it's getting kids early, I think, is the secret. And there's some famous person, I can never remember who it was, that says you can't love and fight for something you don't even know that exists. So I think that's part of what we do, is to get people to know that, you know, this magical bushland with all these threatened species is there, you know, 10 kilometres from Brisbane CBD with, you know, 80 or 50 koalas living in there. If people don't know that the koalas are there, they don't know the threatened plants are there, they're not going to fight to try and stop bikes putting tracks through and ripping the whole thing up. So the whole thing, to me, it's advocacy, but it's to try and get people to know and understand and protect and try and improve the natural areas. That's what my passion sort of is for our very local area, where some of the other people are more, you know, global, which is also important. But to me, I just find local is what I far prefer to do. It's what grabs you.
I also project to the future, like, can we all just take a moment to imagine the joy we're going to feel when Barnaby Joy says, we need climate action and we need it now.
I'll play that with the drinks afterwards. Oh no, you've distracted me, Robyn. I've got this whole other thing going on. Can I ask you one writing question before the final one? Writing is such a transformative process, as is activism and things. What did you learn about yourself or activism writing a book, Robyn?
I learned that it's much easier to write academic stuff. You feel really vulnerable. So I've written the stories of 9 women, and I think 5 of them, I wrote that story on the basis of a 1-hour Zoom interview. And there's an incredible responsibility and fear of getting it wrong. And so part of me would never wants to do this ever again. But you asked for a positive learning, didn't you?
Oh, does it just...
It's made me really greatly appreciate other people who write creative nonfiction. I feel proud. I feel proud that I've got these women's stories down, when I know, talking to each one of them, sometimes it has been hard to convince them that their story is worthy of being recorded. I think
Can I just say, from reading the chapter, like I talked to Robyn for I don't know how long, and I've met her a few other places as well. But when I actually read the chapter, she's tied in all these other things that were happening all over the place in with my story. And I thought, this is absolutely phenomenal, the way everything's all being blended and woven. So I was truly flabbergasted at how it all sort of came. I thought, how is she going to write about me like I'm nothing? And it's just absolutely amazing how it's all tied through.
Jan, I can see you nodding as Heather's saying that as well. Did you have a similar experience reading your story?
I kind of recognise myself in the story. And
It's hard to get Jan to read it. I think I had to ask you a few times to read it.
You did. Yeah, I sort of. Yeah. But I'm happy about it. I'm glad it's all gone forth, and I hope it has some inspirational value for other folks out there who are thinking about wanting to do something but not sure of where to start. Because I regard myself really as an earthworm, you know, a little creature that goes along under the ground, not very conspicuous, but really important for the functioning of terrestrial ecosystems and keeping things going. So if you want to be an earthworm too, come and join me.
Thank you. My favourite quote to wrap up is right near the very end, is although the challenges we face in overcoming our environmental crisis can be overwhelming, these women demonstrate how advocacy can be woven into a life well lived. And it's so striking that they are lives well lived. They're wonderful to read about. So thank you for reading the book, writing the book. We'll read it. What do you want the take-home message to be, apart from go and do more stuff, everyone?
Maybe what Jan mentioned too, maybe thank someone that you know who's been doing this stuff, that and recognise it, and just be happy for all the effort they've put in. That even if you don't want to do advocacy yourself, which is completely fine, we can appreciate all the efforts other people have done and read about them. I'm not sure about another take-home message. I mean, that really is my biggest one, that you can do something. It doesn't really even matter what you do, to be honest. We all could just do something, and that will be something great. What's your take-home message, Jan?
Do what you believe in. Try to do something every day, big or small, either an individual action, a protest action, or action like Heather does of the constructive program. We're going to be what are called a constructive program. Just do something. Be part of it.
My take-home message would be just find something that you enjoy, and try and find like-minded people. And it doesn't have to be advocacy always about the environment. There's other things that people can advocate for. So like my family, I've got a sister and two brothers, and none of them do anything about the environment at all. But my sister, whenever she comes to Brisbane, she happily comes with me to bushwalks or whatever, and she can see, you know, things change over the years. So even if people don't want to do any advocacy for the environment at all, that's, as you say, perfectly fine, as long as they can appreciate that somebody is doing something to try and make our world a better place. And ultimately, we're the ones that live here. So whether you do something like, you know, take a keep cup with you instead of buying a disposable cup, you're doing something to improve the environment. You know, the hoo-ha that we had about the single use plastic bags. I mean, now it's a no-brainer. Like, you know, people were complaining, like, how dare I have to remember to take a bag? Well, you know, you remember your car keys, you remember your wallet. You know, how hard is it to remember to take a bag, to take your shopping? And now people don't even think about that, and they just do it. So I think things like that seem a big thing at the time then become general practice. And it might be small things, but all these small things do build up.
June, I'm just going to ask if you wanted to put your 2 cents in and just have a comment of something that you'd like to see come out of the book and these stories. No pressure.
I suppose the one thing I'd like every activist to do is don't forget to have fun.
Yeah.
I have never had so much fun in all my life in the 20 years I've been doing this. So yeah, don't forget the fun bit.
That's a great comment. Thank you, June. We're going to have some questions now from you guys. Did you want to sit up? You don't have to, but did you want to join the panel, June? No pressure. But yeah, there's questions. Now the microphone sometimes goes weird when we move it, so we'll try that. But if the question doesn't have a microphone on it, if you can repeat it for the Zoomers, that would be fabulous. Who would like to kick us off? Don't be shy. Embrace your inner earth. I've got another 4 pages. If we start. Shall I ask them another one then? What are you guys most proud of?
I suppose I'm proud that I have had the opportunity and been presented with the opportunity to make a difference.
I think that's an excellent answer, actually. I think I'm proud to have been a part of a wider group who believe that we have to do something, and without me being one of the catalysts, who knows what would happen with the areas that the groups have worked in. If I hadn't have been in there, sort of in the background, sort of organising and getting things done, a lot of that wouldn't have happened, and the world would have been a poorer place for that. So I think we should be proud of whatever we've done, whether it's big or small. It might be small to me, but it might be big for somebody else.
I'm most proud of just being part of a great social movement, a global social movement. That we have some fabulous leaders like Greta Thunberg and folk like that who are really inspiring us, and just being part of that whole thing. Just doing my own little thing in my own little corner, trying to reduce the risks of climate catastrophe as best I can.
And my one's probably the same. Or not so much that I'm proud of being part of it, but having written the book and researching activism, I'm proud of the fact that the environmental movement, no bias here, has been the most successful movement in history, I think, in terms of changing opinions and behaviours in the shortest period of time. Like, it really is phenomenal. And even just watching the news over the last week, sure, it's frustrating. But the fact that even Australia, the laggard, is actually talking possibly about bringing a strategy to COP26, this is incredible change in a short time. So I'm proud of what the movement's achieved. I'm also proud, I guess, that for me, so I had a hearing disability, and my early experiences in activism and groups it was not through any intentional efforts to do so, but it was not a very good place to be a person with a disability or who didn't quite fit in. And it was just simply, it's because there were, there's many other concerns. But I'm proud of the fact that from a whole lot of people who have disabilities and other needs, the movement's really embracing this kind of idea that we want everybody and we want to make it all accessible. We want to make it possible. Elle's story in the book shows that we're a long way to get, from there yet. She gives the example of an Extinction Rebellion protest in the UK where they'd organised accessibility toilets and everything, and then they got taken away. So people with disabilities couldn't actually attend the protest. But the fact that these things are being talked about and we're making the movement more inclusive is something I'm very proud of.
An audience.
You're going to repeat anyway, but what do you think your most successful action would be?
What's the most successful of their actions?
It depends on how you define successful. My most successful action. That I want to talk about. Secret ones. Yeah, that's a good one. I've forgotten about that. Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember, but back in the state election before last, Anastasia Palaszczuk got up on the stage at a footy club or something out in Darra to supposedly announce a state announce the state policy, but it was actually announcing the election. And persons unknown got up on the stage with a sign saying "Stop Adani," and it was a big surprise because they weren't expecting us, and all the TV cameras from around the state, if not the country, were there. So yeah, that was a big sign. And since then, they've got a lot more wary about people crashing their meetings, unfortunately.
Stories that sticks with you. success?
I suppose one of the first one that I organised and did a walk to save the reef from Cairns to Gladstone, and we really did get good publicity on that walk, and it's the most publicity we'd ever got on doing anything else like that besides social media publicity. Yeah, so I think that was good, and possibly because it was a warm, fuzzy thing to do.
Other questions?
I've kind of got two questions. One is more pointedly for Robyn. How did you whittle it down to just 9 women? That's the first question. Because there are a lot of women, even just in Southeast Queensland, that we all know. The second question is around the word activist. Like, how do you find a lot of women, and well, not just women, but just in general, a lot of people respond to that word? Because I know for me, I was like, oh, I'm being called an activist, and I felt a bit uncomfortable. So yeah, just wondering about that.
Well, I was actually saying to someone today that the reason why there's 9 women is because it's a prime number. Sorry, it's an odd number, but it's not prime. And I have a thing about like prime numbers. If I wanted a prime number of women, it would have to be 11, and that's too many chapters for a book, right? So 9 is good. No, I I felt like the 9 women covered so many different types of advocacy. It was difficult to find the woman. And in particular, Robyn Whale, who's in Perth, not only was it hard to find her, it was hard to find anything about her. She'd been involved in the women's movement, the abortion rights campaign in Perth for years. She stood for Labour MP. There was nothing online about what she's done. So I think it was not so much finding the woman, but just getting enough of the story there, because we don't record it. And then the second one, the book is very deliberately called The Advocates. That was an absolute deliberate choice. They're not activists. I mean, some would see themselves activists. I see myself as an activist. I don't mind it. But I certainly, like I said earlier, I look at the person I'm talking to and I say, should I say I'm an activist or should I say I'm a volunteer? So the book is designed to show people how many different ways you can do advocacy. And I think if it had been called The Activist, it would have immediately put, it cuts down the number of people who might be inclined to read it.
The number of university libraries willing to buy it.
Another question? How much time have we got? 2 more questions? Come on, get in now while they're on special. I was about to say, if some of the fellas are a bit shy, don't be.
This is not so much a question as a statement, but organisations that I've been involved with, especially Robyn and Jan, the last 8 or so years have been led by really strong women, and I'm quite happy to go 2 ways, just do what I'm told. But you know the group I'm talking about, Robyn. You were saying before that women don't sort of tend to want to step up, but Stop It Down in 350, they certainly have.
Thank you. Another.
Rocky is the ultimate earthworm.
Yes, Rocky has been the stalwart, is that the word? Yeah. Reliable activist volunteer for so long.
Recruiting. We want more people like you. How do we do it? What's the best way that you've discovered of recruiting more to the movement?
That's always a moot point, isn't it? I think activism creates interest. So the more we do, the more people sit up and take notice and feel like they can get involved. That's the only thing I know. I've asked many people outright, if you want to get involved, and usually, not right now. But sometimes that, they agree. Sometimes just asking people face to face will do it. But yeah, just being bouncy and enthusiastic and brave, perhaps in some way, I think it's a good way of and friendly towards people, so that they feel it's a safe place to be and to learn and to grow and to manifest their ideals.
On that one, Belinda Creek, the catchment group that I'm in, it's become a big family. We've got quite a number of our volunteers that are retirement age. Quite a few of them live by themselves, and oftentimes some of them have been coming for 20 or more years. And part of the reason they keep coming is because people listen, people talk to them, people care. If somebody's missing for a couple of weeks, somebody will ring them up and say, how are you going? You all right? Do you need anything? And I think it's those personal connections I think is important. And the other thing several people have told me is they only come to bush care because of morning tea. So I think feed people is a good excuse.
Sticky pink bun, we'll get them every time.
I'm looking forward to reading your book. I want to say thank you so much for the work that you and women do to keep the wheels turning. I suppose I have a question that I'll go to your book with, which is how gendered is advocacy, and do women feel most comfortable when they create their own realm within activism? I was cycling this morning and I was struck by the fact that the men that went past just had this sense of entitlement on this very small riding path, and the women sort of made room, and there was just this level of a different sense of using the space. And I wonder with advocacy if that is something that's in there, is can women join where men are, well established, or do women feel most comfortable, and I speak from my experience, do we feel most comfortable when we create the actual space, or women invite us in? Is it gendered?
It's a difficult topic because any responses are going to be generalizations, but we do know that we like being with people who look like us, right? That's, if anybody's been overseas, like I'm a New Zealander, if I'm overseas and I hear or see a New Zealander, I go straight for them. You want to be around people who are like you. So I guess it makes it easier if you've got a group with women, that women will feel like they join it. But going back to what Heather said earlier, I feel like it's more about the personalities, that they're welcoming, friendly personalities that make you feel like you're valued. Now, maybe women are more socialised to be that way, because we do have a very strong socialisation process as we grow up. There's a lot of evidence about how girls are taught to do certain things with certain toys and boys are taught something different. So maybe that's part of it, and that will change over time. But otherwise, all we can do is generalise from our own experiences. Do you guys have anything? There was something in the book that was very hard to get answers from the woman that I interviewed. I did try to ask them, do you think, women do this and men do that? But yeah, it's just a tricky question.
So a couple of things there. I'm involved with the Australian Electric Vehicle Association, who are mainly a lot of old codgers who like fixing cars and converting cars from internal combustion engines to electric cars in their backyards. So they're backyard tinkers, and they're mainly of a certain age. And last Wednesday I went to a meeting and I was the only woman there. But I had a great time because they're really a friendly bunch of folks. And I feel like by even just my sole presence, if another woman was to attend that meeting, it would be easier for her to stay to see and other women there than if there were just a room of old blokes. But yeah, it does help, I think. And also I'm reminded of what Margaret Mead said, that whatever women do, whether it's whatever men do, whether it's embroidery or hunt crocodiles, that's going to be the socially prestigious activity. Whatever women do is not prestigious. So we maybe turn the prestige of something around. I'm not quite sure where I'm trying to go with this point, but we do alter the social perception of things. But as the status of women increases, maybe we increase the status of social activism.
I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you. I'd like you all to join me in thanking our wonderful panel. Thank you for being amazing women. Thank you for letting us celebrate you despite some natural reticence. And thank you, Robyn, for writing a fabulous book.
I would also like to thank Robyn for writing this wonderful book.
it's been an amazing night hearing women, speaking to women about what they're passionate in. It's just been very inspiring. Thank you to the panel for your contributions. Thank you to Anne for your expert chairing as always. And you can purchase your copy of The Advocates inside. Thanks, everyone.